Co-living on a sphere with deadly predators that roam around freely, no one is safe. From peacefully living quietly at your apartment to getting attacked on your way home, these are 5 wild animals that invaded cities and mauled people alive. Starting off with our first story, where a usual run turns into a predator's feast. August 18, 2011 dawned crisp and clear in Boulder, Colorado, with the promise of another beautiful summer day. The morning air carried a slight chill that would soon give way to warmth. Ideal conditions for hiking, climbing, or in Avery Flint's case, running. Avery was a 17-year-old high school student with her whole life ahead of her. She was known throughout Boulder High School as one of their most promising long-distance runners. Running wasn't just a sport for Avery, it was her passion, her meditation, and her way of connecting with the natural world around her. Every morning, rain or shine, Avery would lace up her running shoes and hit the trails before most people had even poured their first cup of coffee. She had a passion for running, joining competitions and events. Her parents, both working professionals, had initially been concerned about her running alone, but had grown comfortable with her routine over time. That morning began like any other summer day for Avery. She woke up at 6:30 a.m. After a quick breakfast of toast and a banana, she headed out the door, telling her mother she'd be back in an hour. The Chautauqua Park Trail was her chosen route that day, a path she'd run countless times before. The trail was quiet that morning, with only a few early hikers nodding hello as they passed. As Avery entered a more wooded section of the trail, she fully immersed in her running, listening to music, completely unaware of the dangers lurking. Due to her running alone in the forest, she unknowingly attracted a mountain lion with her loud running, cautiously following her, hiding in a small cliff near her. These solitary predators are masters of stealth, with specially adapted retractable claws that allow them to move silently through their territory. Their tan coats blend perfectly with the rocky terrain of Colorado's foothills, making them nearly invisible when stationary. Mountain lions typically avoid humans, but certain factors, hunger, territorial instincts, or the protection of young, can occasionally lead to attacks. In this case, the mountain lion may have perceived Avery's running motion as prey-like behavior, triggering its hunting instinct. Wildlife biologists note that running activates a mountain lion's chase response, as the movement mimics that of fleeing prey. The attack came without warning. As Avery rounded a bend in the trail, the mountain lion pounced from above, landing squarely on her back with devastating force. Mountain lions can leap up to 40 feet horizontally and 15 feet vertically, making their ambush attacks nearly impossible to defend against. The impact knocked her face first onto the dirt path, the weight of the 130-pound cat driving the air from her lungs. The mountain lion had clamped its powerful jaws around the back of her neck. The initial bite was strong enough to sever the spinal cord, a killing technique perfected over millennia of evolution. Mountain lions have specialized carcanial teeth that act like scissors, targeting the neck of prey, are remarkably efficient, and typically result in a quick death. A medical examiner confirmed that Avery's body went limp almost immediately as the cat's canine teeth penetrated deep into her neck. With its prey now subdued, the mountain lion began to drag Avery's body off the main trail and into the underbrush. This behavior is typical of large cats who prefer to feed in seclusion, away from potential threats or competition. Avery is now food for the mountain lion. 2 hours later, a hiker veered slightly off the main trail to photograph a patch of wildflowers. Instead, he made the gruesome discovery of Avery's partially covered body. The hiker, with shaking hands, called 911, reporting the location and the nature of what he had found. The mountain lion dragged her approximately 100 feet from the trail into a dense thicket where it began to cover her body with leaves and debris, a behavior known as caching. This instinctive action helps hide the kill from scavengers and other predators, allowing the mountain lion to return over the next several days to feed. rather than consuming the entire prey at once. The response was swift. Boulder County Sheriff's deputies, park rangers, and emergency medical personnel converged on the scene. The medical examiner later confirmed what was already apparent. Avery had died from catastrophic injuries to her neck and spine. The attack pattern was unmistakably that of a mountain lion. Wildlife experts later determined that she likely lost consciousness within seconds of the initial strike, sparing her from experiencing the full horror of what followed. Colorado Parks and Wildlife officials immediately launched a search for the responsible animal. Using tracking dogs and following the trail of disturbed vegetation, they located the mountain lion later that day, approximately half a mile from where Avery's body had been found. The decision was made to euthanize the animal, both to prevent further attacks and to test it for diseases that might have contributed to its unusual behavior. While the mountain lion stalked Avery in stealth, our next story is another quiet yet massive predator that climbed into a resident's apartment, killing her in cold blood while she was sleeping. June 9, 2015 was a sweltering day in Miami, Florida, with temperatures climbing into the high 90s and humidity that made the air feel thick and oppressive. As night fell, the temperature remained uncomfortably warm, prompting many residents to crank up their air conditioning units to find relief from the tropical climate. Eliza Carradine was a 29-year-old graphic designer who had moved to Miami 2 years earlier, drawn by the city's creative energy and year-round sunshine. Eliza loved bright colors, covering her apartment with indoor plants, and reading books at night. With her bright smile and easygoing personality, she had quickly made friends in her apartment building and around the neighborhood. Living alone in a modest one-bedroom apartment in Little Havana, Eliza had created a cozy space filled with plants, artwork, and books. She had recently been promoted to senior designer and was excited about the new responsibilities and creative challenges that came with the position. That particular day had been especially exhausting for Eliza. After grabbing food, she returned to her apartment looking forward to a quiet evening of relaxation. After dinner, Eliza took a long shower, changed into her comfortable pajamas, and settled into bed. The summer heat had prompted her to turn up the air conditioning. She began to drift off to sleep. What Eliza didn't know was that her upstairs neighbor had been illegally keeping exotic pets in his apartment for years. Among his collection was a 16-foot Burmese python that he raised in secret, against both building regulations and Florida state law. That night, the massive snake had managed to escape its inadequately secured enclosure. It had slithered out of the neighbor's apartment through his partially open balcony door. The python then descended to the level below by using the building's exterior, its powerful muscles allowing it to navigate the short distance between floors. Burmese pythons are excellent climbers, using their muscular bodies and rough scales to grip surfaces and move vertically with surprising agility. Due to the excess of heat, even with the AC on, Eliza left her balcony door open for fresh air to circulate in, providing the perfect entry point for the predator. Burmese pythons are among the largest snake species in the world, capable of growing over 20 feet long and weighing more than 200 pounds. Native to Southeast Asia, these powerful constrictors are ambush predators, using their excellent sense of smell to locate prey and their incredible strength to squeeze the life from their victims. As Eliza slept peacefully in her bed, the python silently entered through the balcony door and began to explore this new environment. Pythons have heat-sensing pits along their jaws that allow them to detect the body heat of potential prey even in complete darkness. Though not a typical predator to humans, pythons are opportunistic, especially when hunger and heat combine. Drawn by the warmth of Eliza's body, the python slowly approached the bed. Eliza stirred in her sleep. This slight movement was enough to trigger the python's predatory instinct. In one fluid motion, the massive reptile struck, wrapping its muscular coils around Eliza's torso and beginning to constrict. Contrary to popular belief, pythons don't crush their prey or break bones. Instead, they prevent breathing by tightening their coils each time the victim exhales, making it impossible to draw the next breath. Eliza's eyes opened in terror as she felt the crushing pressure around her chest. She tried to scream, but the python's grip had already begun to restrict her ability to draw breath. With her arms pinned to her sides, she thrashed desperately. The python responded to her struggles by tightening its grip further. Each time Eliza exhaled, the snake constricted more, preventing her from taking in a full breath. With each passing second, Eliza's movements became weaker as oxygen deprivation began to affect her brain. In her final moments of consciousness, Eliza managed to kick her legs forcefully enough to knock several books from the shelf, creating a loud thump. Her neighbor in the adjacent apartment, who had been having trouble sleeping, heard the commotion and the loud thump. Concerned, the neighbor knocked on Eliza's door. Receiving no response, she alerted the building's landlord, who had a master key. By the time they entered the apartment, it was already too late. They found Eliza's lifeless body on the floor beside her bed, still partially wrapped in the python's coils. The landlord immediately called 911 and police and animal control officers arrived within minutes. The python was captured and later euthanized for testing. The neighbor was arrested and charged with multiple offenses, including manslaughter, illegal possession of exotic animals, and violation of Florida's wildlife laws. He eventually received a 7-year prison sentence. Eliza's death was caused by an unattended, cold-blooded predator that quietly navigated and entered her home, while our next story used intelligence and force to enter a home in Kenya, killing an innocent boy. November 2nd, 2012 was unusually hot and dry in Nairobi, Kenya, even by local standards. The drought that had gripped the region for nearly 2 years showed no signs of breaking, leaving the landscape parched and the wildlife desperate. As night fell over the sprawling informal settlement of Mukuru kwa Njenga, the temperature remained uncomfortably high, with residents leaving windows and doors ajar in hopes of catching any stray breeze that might provide relief from the stifling heat, a necessity that some would find very dangerous. 6-year-old Isaac Mwangi was the youngest of 4 children in a family struggling to make ends meet in Mukuru. With his bright eyes and infectious laugh, he was beloved by everyone in the community. Isaac's father worked as a day laborer at construction sites around the city, while his mother sold vegetables at a small stall near their home. Their family lived in a single-room dwelling made of corrugated metal sheets, with a dirt floor and a small charcoal stove for cooking. The drought had had devastating effects on the wildlife, pushing animals to venture closer to human settlements in search of food and water. Spotted hyenas, the species common to Kenya, can hunt in packs or alone and have been known to kill animals as large as wildebeest and zebra. Their jaws are among the most powerful in the animal kingdom, with a bite force exceeding 1,100 pounds per square inch, strong enough to crush the femur of a giraffe. This extraordinary strength allows them to consume every part of their prey, including bones and hooves, leaving virtually nothing behind. On that November evening, the Mwangi family went about their usual routine. After a simple dinner, the children did their homework by the light of a kerosene lamp. As night passes, the family prepares for bed. By midnight, everyone had finally fallen into a deep sleep, exhausted from the day's work and the oppressive heat. Unknown to the sleeping family, a clan of hyenas had been spotted earlier that evening on the outskirts of Mukuru. Hyenas have an incredible sense of smell. They can detect odors from up to 4 kilometers away, and the scent of the settlement's waste and livestock has drawn them closer to human habitation than they would normally venture. Unlike many predators, hyenas are not deterred by human presence and will readily enter villages and settlements if they sense an opportunity for food. Their nocturnal habits make them particularly dangerous, as they can move through human areas under the cover of darkness. One particular hyena, an adult female estimated to weigh around 70 kilograms, had separated from the clan. Wildlife experts would later speculate that she might have been desperate to feed her cubs, as female hyenas are the dominant providers in their social structure. In hyena society, females are larger, more aggressive, and higher ranking than males, a rare characteristic in the mammal world. The hyena approached the Mwangi family's home. The drought had made food scarce, and hunger had made the animal bold. Using her powerful jaws, she began to work at the weak point where the door met the frame. Hyenas are remarkably intelligent and persistent, with problem-solving abilities that rival those of great apes. When motivated by hunger, they can be incredibly resourceful in accessing potential food sources. The sound of metal scraping against wood caused Isaac's father to stir, but before he could fully wake, the hyena had managed to create an opening large enough to squeeze through. The animal entered the dark room. Hyenas have excellent night vision, with a reflective layer behind their retinas called the tapetum lucidum that enhances their ability to see in low-light conditions. The hyena's keen nose led it directly to the sleeping children. In a split second, the hyena clamped its jaws around Isaac's head and neck. The boy barely had time to wake. His sudden scream jolted the family awake, but in the dark confusion, they couldn't immediately comprehend what was happening. They weren't aware that Isaac was already being dragged away. Isaac's mother reached frantically in the darkness where her son had been sleeping just moments before, while his father lunged toward the door, catching a glimpse of a large, hunched silhouette disappearing into the night with his son. The hyena moved with surprising speed, dragging Isaac away. Hyenas can run at speeds of up to 60 kilometers per hour over short distances, making them difficult to chase on foot. The boy's screams quickly faded as the predator carried him further from home. Isaac's father gave chase, shouting for help as he ran barefoot through the narrow pathways between homes. Neighbors emerged from their dwellings, alerted by the commotion. Some grabbed whatever weapons they could find, sticks, tools, kitchen knives, and joined the desperate search. But the hyena had already put considerable distance between itself and the pursuers. With its powerful neck and shoulders, it could easily carry the small boy. As dawn broke, a group of men who had ventured about 80 meters from the edge of the settlement made the grim discovery. Isaac's small body lay partially hidden in a patch of tall grass, his bright school uniform now torn and stained dark with blood. The hyena carried him approximately 80 meters from the home. The hyena had apparently been startled by the search party before it could consume its prey. The noise and lights from the searchers had likely interrupted this process, causing the predator to abandon its kill, a behavior that's common when hyenas are disturbed during feeding. The community was devastated. Women wailed in grief as Isaac's body was carefully wrapped in a blanket and carried back to the settlement. His parents, who had continued searching in another direction, collapsed in anguish when they received the news. Their youngest child, their beloved boy with the bright future, was gone. Due to the hunger of the hyena, it confidently entered a home, taking a young boy's life. But in our next story, the animal was not hungry. It had a disease that soon infected its victim. March 14, 2016 began as a mild spring day in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. The morning frost had given way to sunshine. By late afternoon, the temperature had climbed into the low 60s, prompting many residents to open windows and spend time outdoors after the long winter months. Martin Delano was an 81-year-old retired high school history teacher who had lived in the same Cherry Hill home for over 4 decades. Martin lived alone except for his beloved golden retriever, Rusty. Despite his age, Martin maintained an active lifestyle. Neighbors often saw him chatting with fellow dog walkers or helping younger families with historical research for their children's school projects. His gentle demeanor and encyclopedic knowledge made him a beloved figure in the community. That particular day, Martin had spent the morning and early afternoon volunteering at the library. He returned home ready for his evening ritual with Rusty. As usual, he filled Rusty's bowl on the back porch while the dog waited patiently. What Martin didn't know was that a raccoon had been frequenting his neighborhood for several days, exhibiting behavior that concerned some residents. Normally nocturnal creatures, this particular raccoon had been spotted during daylight hours, appearing disoriented and unusually aggressive. Raccoons are common throughout North America and are highly adaptable to urban and suburban environments. These intelligent omnivores have dexterous front paws with 5 fingers each, allowing them to open garbage cans, unscrew jars, and manipulate complex objects. While generally not dangerous to humans, they can carry several diseases, most notably rabies. As Martin bent down to place Rusty's bowl on the porch, he saw a medium-sized raccoon approaching from the corner of the yard. The animal moved with an unsteady gait, its fur matted and disheveled. Martin straightened up slowly, not wanting to startle the creature, and placed a protective hand on Rusty's collar. The raccoon stopped momentarily, swaying slightly as it seemed to assess the situation. Then, without warning, it charged forward with surprising speed. Before Martin could react, the raccoon had lunged at him, latching onto his right hand with its teeth and claws. The initial bite was painful, causing Martin to cry out in surprise. Rusty barked frantically, but the elderly dog was too well trained to attack without command. Martin tried to shake the raccoon off, but it held firm, its teeth penetrating the skin between his thumb and forefinger. Raccoons have sharp, pointed teeth designed for their omnivorous diet, capable of tearing flesh and causing puncture wounds rather than the large lacerations that might come from larger predators. Martin shouted and swung his arm in an attempt to dislodge the animal. Animals infected with rabies often exhibit what's called furious rabies, characterized by increased aggression and a complete lack of fear, behaviors that would normally be suppressed in healthy wild animals. With his free hand, Martin managed to reach for a broom that was leaning against the porch railing. He swung it at the raccoon, striking it hard enough to finally break its grip on his arm. The animal fell to the porch floor but immediately turned to attack again, its eyes wild and mouth foaming slightly. Excessive salivation or foaming at the mouth is one of the classic symptoms of rabies, caused by the virus's effect on the salivary glands and the animal's inability to swallow normally. Martin used the broom to keep the raccoon at bay, jabbing at it repeatedly until it finally retreated, disappearing under a gap in the fence. Shaking and in shock, Martin stumbled into his kitchen, where he ran cold water over his bleeding wounds. Rusty whined anxiously at his feet, sensing his owner's distress. A neighbor who had heard the commotion came to check on Martin and was alarmed by the bite wounds. Despite Martin's protest that he was fine, she insisted on driving him to the emergency room. It was at this critical junction that Martin made a decision that would ultimately cost him his life. A deeply religious man with some unconventional beliefs about medicine, Martin refused the rabies treatment. Despite the doctor's warnings about the seriousness of rabies and the urgency of beginning treatment, Martin insisted that he would be fine with just antibiotics for the wound infection. The medical staff documented his refusal of treatment and provided him with information about rabies symptoms, urging him to return immediately if he experienced any unusual sensations, difficulty swallowing, confusion, or agitation. Martin nodded politely but remained firm in his decision. He went back home and everything was fine until about 3 weeks after the incident. Concerned neighbors who hadn't seen Martin walking Rusty for several days checked on him and found him confused and agitated. When he told them about his symptoms and admitted that water caused him painful throat spasms when he tried to drink, they immediately called an ambulance. By the time Martin arrived at the hospital, he was in the advanced stages of rabies. His confusion had progressed to delirium. with periods of extreme agitation alternating with paralysis. This phase, known as furious rabies, is characterized by hyperactivity, confusion, hallucinations, and aggressive behavior. Martin's condition deteriorated rapidly. 7 days after the onset of symptoms, Martin Delano died from rabies. Martin's dog Rusty was taken in by a former student of his who lived nearby. Because Rusty's rabies vaccinations were up to date, he did not develop the disease, though he was kept under observation for several months as a precaution. Domestic animals like dogs and cats serve as an important buffer between wildlife rabies and humans, which is why rabies vaccination is required by law in most jurisdictions. Due to Martin's stubbornness, he sadly not only met his end but also left his dog alone. There are moments in nature where you encounter unexpected wildlife predators. And in our next story, an individual encounters a much bigger and more aggressive killer that moves in packs: wolves. February 22, 2013 was bitterly cold in Bogorodskoye, Russia, with temperatures plummeting to negative 35 degrees C as darkness fell over the remote village. The air was so cold that each breath formed a dense cloud of vapor, and the snow crunched loudly underfoot. The village itself was quiet, with most residents having retreated to the warmth of their homes hours earlier, leaving the streets deserted except for occasional wisps of smoke rising from chimneys. Denis Velkov was a 42-year-old mechanic who had lived in Bogorodskoye his entire life. Stocky and strong from years of physical labor, with a thick beard that helped protect his face from the bitter cold, Denis was known throughout the village as someone who could fix almost anything with an engine. February 2013 had been particularly harsh, with heavy snowfall and dropping temperatures. Food was becoming scarce, not only for the villagers but also for the wildlife in the surrounding forests. Wolves, which normally avoid human settlements, had been spotted increasingly close to the village, drawn by the scent of livestock and garbage. Several residents had reported seeing wolf tracks circling their properties, and a few had heard howling uncontrollably close to their homes at night. On that fateful evening, Denis had stayed late at his workshop. By the time he completed the work, it was already midnight. The village had turned quiet. Denis bundled up for the walk home. He carried a small flashlight, though the full moon reflected brightly off the snow. The road leading from the village to his house was rarely used in winter. Denis walked briskly. The only sounds were the crunch of his boots on the packed snow and the occasional distant crack of a tree branch breaking under the weight of ice. About halfway home, Denis paused. Something felt wrong. The night had become too quiet, with even the usual whisper of wind through the trees suddenly absent. Denis quickened his pace, focused entirely on reaching the safety of his home. He was less than a kilometer away when suddenly a gray wolf appeared, emerging from the trees to his right. Eurasian gray wolves, the species native to Russia, are among the largest wolf subspecies, with males weighing up to 175 pounds and standing nearly a meter tall at the shoulder. Their thick winter coats with dense underfur and long guard hairs give them a much larger appearance in the cold months and allow them to survive in low temperatures. Wolves generally avoid humans, but something about this wolf's behavior, the direct approach, the lack of caution, this encounter is different. As Denis stood motionless, more wolves emerged from the forest, a hunting pack driven by hunger to take unusual risks. They formed a loose semicircle around him, cutting off his path home. The lead wolf lunged forward, but rather than going directly for Denis' throat, as might happen in fiction, it targeted his leg, attempting to hamstring him and bring him down. This is the standard hunting technique used by wolves against large prey like moose and elk. They attack the legs first to immobilize the animal before delivering fatal bites to more vulnerable areas. Another wolf darted in from the side, clamping its jaws around Denis' arm. The thick layers of his winter clothing prevented the teeth from immediately reaching flesh, but the force of the bite was still agonizing. A wolf's jaw can exert up to 1,500 pounds of pressure per square inch, enough to crush bone and tear through heavy clothing with ease. Denis fought desperately against the wolves as they circled and lunged. He was outnumbered and in an impossible position. Within minutes, his strength began to wane, and the wolves sensed his weakening. Wolves are incredibly intelligent predators with remarkable stamina. They can maintain pursuits for hours, wearing down prey through exhaustion rather than speed alone. Wolf attacks on humans are extremely rare, but when they do occur, they follow the same pattern used against natural prey species. Denis slipped on the trampled icy snow. Only after he was down did the lead wolf approach his neck and throat, the killing technique that would end the struggle. The pain was excruciating, but Denis continued to fight even as he felt the other wolves tearing at his legs and side. But even putting up a fight, Denis was defeated. The next morning, a villager named Mikhail Sokolov was traveling the same road on his way to ask Denis about repairs to his generator. From a distance, he noticed something dark against the white snow. As he approached, the ravens that had been circling took flight, revealing the gruesome scene below. Ravens and wolves have a complex relationship in the wild. The birds often follow wolf packs scavenging from their kills, and have even been observed playing with wolf pups. Denis' body lay in the center of the path, surrounded by a wide circle of blood-stained snow and clear evidence of a violent struggle. Mikhail crossed himself and quickly returned to the village to alert the authorities. By noon, a group of men had recovered Denis' body and brought it back to the village. Wildlife experts who investigated the incident concluded that the unusually harsh winter had reduced the wolves' natural prey population, had created the perfect conditions for such an attack. While wolf attacks on humans are extremely rare, with only a handful of documented fatal attacks in Russia over the past century, they become more likely when wolves are starving and desperate. Want to watch more kinds of these videos? Click on your screen now. Thanks for watching.